Okay.
Yeah, I'll also be recording on like a local device.
Perfect. Okay, I'm downloading the doc, and let me get a flow open. Okay, I am good.
I'm good as well.
Aditya, you're good, right?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. Cool. Cool. Planning preparation outer space actual mango needs to be banned and releases increase the ocean adding an optional protocol on Article 2 37. This is also just for for the last meeting we prepared to make sure the island laws are surrounded and also fight all different preparation somebody to make any mention of private national preparation private 9 days. There needs also years even the others to the preparation vice preparation out to develop public private need for the number of system advantage one is space worker space units of 039 included in fact regulation of 16. This is the properties and space as develops one of the fabric labor reviews of the 30 daily 30 in the meetings so they're not laws and video and details of the property and distribution versus create a cascading effect versus separation arms and natural frameworks also but you not action possess police not anything. As your main can become the next thing of savers, there's an issue must hold must clear about the gap in terms of funding the passage with the result of the parts that I want to lead into the getting purposes. These missions is not the easy. There's a lot of getting too late and nuclear what is allowed what is prohibited. Somebody in the reason there's also the reason to be an accessible create the sharing the world economy there's a need pursuing culture versus ideal something that I'm ready to become in its beneficiary that's global government American Japanese and North and any club specific on the North the international economy and inevitable market extension guarantees for populous governments with clean bubbles and federal leagues is also working on a process that's inevitable and you don't have to legal as mining and also the competition of the security and investment and actual mining for this is in the US China and Russia that's which matches 21 words in mining these China Russia going for the US Germany has been extreme for rose paper mining public art and of course security systems mining without any sort of national security from the gas reason and economic opportunity there because of China Russia raise increased cooperation examples around many such as in the meeting is a very able debate and US actual mining which is Russia and other countries to the same side of valid in mining just like the attention that's why North mining the other countries that are critical to use of the purpose of mining is also that is during the advantages of operation actual mining thing erase realities for the debate versus running to the involvement initial must follow the use and its various purposes and anything will be the other for us on how the we pursued into the pick up patent to certain you go with it his is particularly born for disabilities is an omnibus and it the right first serve and also not engaging warning it'll feel use the versus like these televisions and other missions of blood and reverse my media reverse because of the use of nuclear weapons and spaces very awkward rather than nuclear war causes distinction of star 17 nuclear war fields and global famine so could as a government for decades and much as 50% for protection if he's for every center or 9 mass justified just not about 30% of the sometimes numbers of all increasing which is in the human population and research extraction space is not a sustainable market profitably metrics and total cost and mobilization regarding 17 the rate combined munitions on uses and estimates of capital companies are generating profits the year before bringing gas bringing up his massive and user mining values is your profit for the developers capital monitoring and whether the amount of actual mobility and project production is incomparable and the analysis of the capital spawning again there is advantage to debris mining advantage to debris mining creates to be bully March 20 money can generate resources operational concerns any service activity collapses and trajectory tech costs in orbit to full in orbit to complete so the debris and national stations is able to run loss of service material mining could lead to control versus sublimation the resulting debris seems to the new operations will sell very potentially to or the impact emergency decisions are for some evidence small factors used to make greater on Ryogu and space such as first spirals and accident can make you China increasing likelihood of poisons in Project 17 when particles have analyzed the poison and causing emission radiation trusted and find hundreds of millions of the smaller particles and making access to kilometers per second NASA mechanical damage where the bigger chunks just size might lead more insidious marks and causing less damage to the functions of the station where it designs and a bit of the ship generates ions and launches options to pull back to the ions and surface head to conserve should be answered also movement of electrons due to natural magnetic radiation and increases space to be those for mining clouds to keep that's also seen minus within cells across the space for nitrogen to market union over next gravity so the particles escape into the research first going to remain defense cells so 5% of the state rule and then reasons to versus cells to across over 60 times the level suffer high speed collision after 5 meters across the regular increase versus 137 we have to worry about collisions and a laundry list of mixed compromise communication loss of capability more diversity 15 also cell ability to determine absorption and dramatic reduction ability to communicate faults and native FB rather than pressure on lines to the loss of cells have a effect on arms without the media running by we don't know what's going on during a typical working cells so they must be billion lives like cells and kudos and carbon dioxide levels and collision with high value cells guarantee nuclear solution in glycine 2021. Amid increased interest in continuing farm diversity, the public functioning, so maybe the outcome of space to be small and severe reduction, the hovering of a wider nuclear and accuracy is only the possibility of retaliation. Yes, double paper for what has happened, the humanity still made on a sufficient awareness and for the resulting counteractions set up at each cycle, that's what is needed to attach or consequences had in the detention of the outcome is slowing out further than status with debris is Goldilocks current orbital debris distorts space aggression by adding more generous more in orbital 21. Debris generates a deterrence effect increases the cost of aggression, running debris danger able we can never see make deterrence making hostile actions more likely the orbital point of which debris because more percentage of trace of it they have interesting life so all you do for debris are just debris to positive effort deterrence effects precisely these as good a framework. The standard is maximizing cycle being before one extra city aggregation every possibility emphasis on the harm itself. Those also means freeze action. 2 does better not ways agents can fear if they fear for their body's security, which can trace every ethical theory. 3 induces that way is the foundational basis for any argument. And 2 is the contradictions of the possibility false we can every determine why 4 is evidence that outweigh all of its infinite value and is only the possibility for generation to be 17. Can be reached with 9% or 100% difference. 2 there's much be another time and the family is regular whole so that she has no possession to destroy the future. The future could be long and pushing out a lot of value. There's no possession to the future generation nothing into the days of the wishes of this warranted person unprecedented risk and I'll send this later. Interpretation debaters must on the page with their name and the school date and disclose the documents they read at least 1 week after the round to open source. Technically should be cited on the wiki violation. Open source for the ask plus sites had to check open source plus we asked them before and they didn't. The standards first is research disclosure and 2 is research and 4 is debaters to verification and people up on 2015. The wiki where the public body of knowledge disclosure motivates researchers debaters with access to cases can be more targeted specific debaters more substance results and responses. Second is evidence that they opens is the only way to verify before around the rare cards and miscut. Otherwise you could have highlighted unethically. That's a voter maintaining ethical evidence practices is key to being good academics and you should be able to verify you didn't cheat voters. 1 is fairness and education, a basic given your useful value in education to support skills. 2, use competing interpretations. A, recently noticed arbitrator judge. Number 2, don't know your BS meter. B, classes of competing interpretations. 5, 2 violence and opportunities. For number 6, 2 interps. 3, no arbitration for being an office burden. Go back to the brief. Asteroid mining is all hype advances are exaggerated and no resistance read 14. If you hold an asteroid, you was a little hopeless from like any resistance to the usage from the hollow back to the resistance leading to much problems to believe whatever blend rhetoric got potential also like the way with diversity heading up there for zombie simple most asteroids between Mars and Jupiter 30 million miles away the radius century attacker capital 7 to the volume to billionaires and space colonization is impossible. Levant 19. There's little consensus whether colonization is necessary even possible subsisting colonies hardly feasible sustaining even a small number of colonies would require continuous supply of food basic materials. It's not clear whether it would be possible to establish a system these resources locally or rely on delivery from Earth. It would be quite impossible to and had plenty of pretty high tech, but virtually important assets, medicines, electronics, and robotics.
Alright, can you send the disclosure show?
Yeah. Or shoot. You replied to the tab email. Give me a sec. Send file. Okay, I sent it.
Alright, I'll let you know when I get it. Oh, I'll start Krause when I get it.
No worries. Works.
It was on email.
Yeah, I put it on email.
I just got it.
Oh, what?
I just got it.
Yeah.
Very good. Alright, time starts now. Let's see. First on framing, I'm on the debris abandon. It says astro mining is impossible. How do you get access to your impacts?
I guess the reader, if you're talking about the reader evidence in particular, it talks about when we sort of do asteroid mining, the ability for us to get resources in like a long-term scenario would be hard. We would still be able to do asteroid mining, but it's a question of like the long-term implications on resources because they would be put to space first. On the second claim the reader evidence makes is that it's really hard to get there because of the financial costs, etc. It doesn't say that like it's not going to happen. Specifically, the last part we highlighted talks about how it's only going to be open to billionaires, but how it's going to be a very selective market and that it wouldn't be like almost every private company is related to go to space.
All right, so debris. There's already a crap ton of debris in space right now. Why hasn't a collision with military satellite happened?
Well, I guess the idea is that the debris caused by mining would be large enough to the point where there's like a lot of space, minimal space debris. The current debris is like relatively large considering it's from like minimal government satellites, etc. But mining is something that could like cause a lot more space debris because like the Ebola virus evidence indicates it would like lead to a magnified increase of like dust, etc. Because like all of that trajectory would first of all like it talks about first of all it talks about why that's uniquely going to go over orbits that are like bad because they can cause that conflict with satellites. Second, it talks about why it's unique because when you do mining, the sort of explosion of like all of the other debris is larger magnitude because like when you do mining, like it's like the rubble effect coming out of it is what causes debris versus something like a satellite, where it's like the satellite itself.
Alright, cool. The disclaimer, this is about my AF wiki. Why was there in-round abuse?
Two reasons. First, we make a claim that it isn't necessarily about in-round abuse. It's sort of a question about creating a norm for the debate activity, i.e. that you've decided not to disclose in the AF wiki, which not only would affect other debaters who are debating you on affirmative, but would also affect this entire idea the Nails evidence talks about increasing a public body of knowledge, etc. Secondly, it would probably impact me because my ability to prepare for you before this tournament is impacted by the fact that I don't know your affirmative. You don't have it disclosed on sites. Open source is literally not there, so that makes it impossible to predict it. Other than the word Starlink, which can definitely mean a million things because people are rating Starlink with different advantages, different context, etc.
Alright, cool. Let's see. Okay. So why is an international? Okay, how the affirmative defense to OST? So how is an international body created during OST as per the MAC order evidence?
Well, it isn't creating an international body. It's rather using the international body of the OST to create a multilateral regime that advocates for things through optional protocol that would prevent a private appropriation of outer space. I always say that the OST is currently insufficient, and we should use optional protocol to add something to it, which is in this case private appropriation of astron mining being bad or illegal.
Alright, do states listen to the OST?
Do states listen to the OST? We kind of fiat that through normal means it would be the signatures of the OST doing it. Oh no, sorry, we don't fiat normal means. We fiat the plan, and our normal means evidence indicates that states would be the ones saying yes to the OST. So yeah, they would have an incentive to comply.
Okay. I'll take real quick prep because it is open source crap.
Is it 4 or 5?
4 minutes. I'm pretty sure the ballots say 4. But I don't care. We can do 5 if you want, but...
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some contradiction because it also says it follows the TOC rules, and the TOC rules are 5. So.
Okay, then we can do 5.
Very cool.
Alright, so I just finished. Alright, send it out as 3 in case. Case, it will be the shell, whatever it is, then the framing, space run, and collisions.
Can you repeat that real quick? Sorry.
3 off, and then it will be the shell, the framing, and then the advantages in order they were read. It should be sent.
I don't have it yet.
It's in file share, but
I'm also still waiting on the email.
My bad. Yeah, I've been using file share the whole tournament. So.
I just downloaded it from FileShare. That's fine for me.
That's my bad. Alright, I just sent it in the email.
Alright, I'm ready.
Alright, Derek, or DD, are you good?
I'm good.
Alright. I'm just gonna close.
I'm good.
Wait, Keshav, are you good? Or?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. First off is topicality, inter to aptly not defend a substantive appropriation violation. They defend mining atemporal Germans that refer to a kind of activity are interpreted generically. Fontaine 19 referentially use Germans to realize generic reference and referring to a kind of activity considering atemporal confined to the interest of a temporal location not being the development of being and both for limits and ground infinite combinations of atoms by mining helium-3 and space time disclosed after you can cherry pick atoms with no net granite atmos prep by all as while they prep one connects like mining consists also only drop to be on furnace education and corresponding no RBS from their own theory show on to second off. Their representation of space as liberatory and transcendental while incorporating neutral threats of people underground reifies systems of anti-black imperialism, carcerality, and international managerialism that allow for the state to distance its relationship to racial capitalism and continually engage in racial dispossession. Stage 14.
The qualities of the space are integral to the extraterrestrial projections of U.S. geopower, fueling interconnected managerialism, hopes and remains a global commodity. These circulations to the extraterrestrial assemblage of the stated American identity remain in the transit of its limits, enable it aggrandizing it has a sovereign territory and its people's messianic extension. Let us be the visions of America as the promised land inflected in previous time investments, including the military intervention into the global south, and all these projects involve celestial transcendence as a apparatus of American geopower, allows populations to be controlled and allow these populations to be controlled, and that's a developed term kind of taking second line people and machines and national American geopower, the American transcendental state is divinely exceptional right its name and to command cosmic space and immutability. This cosmic space and realize the transformative components that sustain it across artwork and Kennedy's with speech and space shuttle, space shuttle challenger, and across the development of American space flight, the parents of the notions that the Marcus of exploration frontier in the future geology appear not least for analysis open challenging the cosmic aggrandizement of the American by attempt to resist naming about future progress in the cosmos and the cosmic dare read these slash regionalization to constantly in American transcendental state depends upon the cultivation and confidence in the technocracy allied to a positive openness in the future as life and life enhancing and oriented towards the transcendence of America as recent time in we have entered into the cosmic age where all states derive energy from the cosmos. Next, the picture side to the class struggle expansion of the state jurisdiction allows for the state to act as an interrelated relationship with companies and is a precondition of privatization. Andrew 217. The state plays fundamental occur political role in random relations. The state creates property rights and allows for grant to be extracted. It constitutes property as a social form and this precondition of appropriation of power to seek to limit appropriation is what makes appropriation possible. The state sets and enforces its distribution of titles and creates frameworks. The new form of rent bearing acts like a landlord. The state is fundamental to securing control over property and the site of the social struggle, and the state is inseparable from the socio-ecological relations, and the state finances infrastructure to the control over private property, maintains thus facilitate value grabbing and accumulation, extraction, and expropriation occur through racial dispossession, raceless population fraction, and territorial foreign state of hyper exploitation for financial capital. 18. Racial laws such as avoid accumulation and capitalist law curve expropriation generates racial order by fracturing the population of black racialization renders subjects unsuitable for hyper-exploitation, expropriation, and annihilation. Races maintain not only segment economic value but also the index of vulnerability. Accumulation in a capitalist society occur along exploitation and expropriation, what makes other possible and racialized education of whom capital expropriation is a possibility for freedom and does it explosion of present regime of racialized accumulation and financialist capitalist expropriation inflicting not only perpetrators of but also those who previously shielded by the status of citizens workers. If expropriation and exploitation occur along continually would be possible to probabilistic and subject according to the risk, and neoliberal capitalism will produce the system reproduces crises that depoliticizes the left, undermines mutual thought, and postpones its mighty impact to our environmental collapse, endless war, and rise of fascism. Severe 15. Global warming, environmental pollution, and threats undermine a way of life. The world is today characterized by polarization, unemployment, and the search for new markets, and the suggestion of all applications of life to the discipline of market on a global scale. In 2008, the big base were built that's allowed to resume practice that led to break down the crisis helping to renew through war, abandonment, and creative destruction. Neoliberals are strictly neoliberals interest language of its critical possibility and reproduces creation challenge. This reinforces why this endless why people think they are free of responsibility. Thus, our role to ballot and role to judge is to endorse tactics against racial capitalism. 003. The exchange of capital takes precedence over social justice, traditional language, and fighting against injustice based upon race and class and language district is critical and social possibilities. Race is only as important as you allow to be whiteness, at least a relationship between racial differences and power reinforces whiteness and arbitral value and provides an ideological space for your guilt, self-reflection, and political responsibility. Next, reject the advent favor of revolutionary intercommunalism, affirm the international movement against carceral capitalism and technocratic managerialism. Do 204. We are in reactionary intercommunalism, material conditions exist in developed culture that would nurture people to resolve contradictions. Such a culture would be revolutionary intercommunalism. Imperialism has rooted to reactionary intercommunalism because the world is integrated into one community. These are the same energies, the same intent of will resolve, and people will establish a revolutionary intercommunalism. When the people see the means of production, they will be free to recreate and establish communism. Next off. Counterplan as reminded by private entities should be banned. Space policies are grounded on representation in outer space as a battlefield and rely on virtual relationships in space itself produced by mediated technological simulations. This virtual relationship erases territory as a threat and risk because of ubiquitous android and it requires a direct course structure to mix weaponization and conflict inevitable. Born in 9. The construction of a space weapon proceeds weaponization is weapon ranges and meaningful. The technical proceeds of spatial outer space as a pleasant author to action is weaponization is witness embraces that assumes the but opposite defenses affects abuse of spatiality insofar as the image of the battlefield becomes ubiquitous, fabricating field of conflict in outer space lock needs to defend space against another and divide space into hours and there's worst case scenario commits us to assume everything will happen on case.
The show.
First, you should only justify we don't justify what we did. You should not justify potential abuse for the disclosure. It's a question of procedures. Obviously, if my procedures in the debate space were so uniquely good, statistically in its round, and always held their arguments, potential abuse means that I could be held accountable to say literally every single thing my counterpretation would justify, which obviously shouldn't model doing. Now, counterpretation, I only have to disclose apps on the wiki as long as those apps don't change between rounds. If there's zero changes between docs, evidence, and analytics, it's a reason why I don't have to disclose. At one point is wiki overload. Others, I just keep uploading docs into wiki and overloads the wiki. It has happened before, especially during weeks where there's like 3 tournaments, like Harvard Westlake weekend or the Green Hill weekend. Second is that it's easier to find for novices and just debaters in general, because if you just look at the sidebar, see what the tournament is for, and just go to one doc, it's easier to find it. And it solves all of your office and has the greatest central link to fairness. Also, it solves all of your shit because obviously I'm still open sourcing my wiki and there's no changes between the evidence, which solves all of your evidence settings bullshit and things like that. Also, there's no abuse because it's about the app wiki and display. I'm literally neg on this one. I open source every single document on the negative wiki, and there was just one doc I didn't open source in the negative wiki, and I said it's due to a technical issue in the sidebar, which I always solve your arguments. Now I lie about compliance from your arguments on Neil's evidence. No, Neil's evidence just says that open source is good. Cool, yeah, we do that. You were saying that debaters should open source as long as the apps don't change the evidence ethics argument. Don't buy it because because there's no changes between the evidence of fairness argument. Again, there's no fairness evaluation because we open source every single prototype we read with and any changes and like the November December strikes app, the November December strikes app. Yeah. Let's go to util. The obscurization of racist white genetics and lust for the real and fight psychic extermination blindness to prioritize rest of the white body that flips or triad calculus present 17 D direct quotes of racial groups may be existential. There's a short of step and psychic to real determination negation individual loss for physical extermination preparation for existential justice of pandemics nuclear war has been eugenic and practice survival does based upon on race and policies make people would be like an existence where it should be one of whiteness and negation of existence. The existence of black people is categorized on different metaphysical origins and have white people and life could be treated so cheaply and even plausibly and basis plots in terms of how we classify existential threat as a one negation. There are degrees of graduation between those forms of existential and actual extermination. The space for argument not only certain space there's on territory to wage in virtual constructions is actually no. There's no space for insurmountable barriers and everyone has interest in keeping space peaceful. There was 19 states have come develop passive defense to protect physical instructions and environmental practice military operations. No contemporary active will reach full weight space weapons and peace possible. The combination is possible of rendering this object space peaceful and preventing it rather than finding ways to fight it remain the goal. And the collisions argument Russia says no order planes water down Calvary and Pearl 19. To use treaties is not feasible. Existing treaties had their little say that no formal mechanism OSC, no formal mechanism for compliance, no restrictions on development of weapons or even impossible to conceive of Moscow, Beijing, can also make it difficult to verify compliance. Cool.
Good for Krause.
Hold up. Yeah, I'm good for Krause.
Wait. Status of decay. Status of decay for the alts.
Both the current and the decay are conditional.
Wait. Cool. The alternative, what does it do?
The alternative affirms revolutionary intercommunalism. There's multiple different examples of this. Things like the Black Panther Party's breakfast programs or the African Socialist Party, things like that. We affirm this tactics. We think debate should be a side of tactics to export into the real world.
I guess how do tactics solve things like liberatory, like imperialist countries like the United States?
I mean, this revolutionary intercommunalism is an international movement against capitalism. We think that debate as a site should be used as a pedagogical space to deliberate tactics.
Okay, I guess going to this YouTube page, can you explain the warrant on the precedent evidence?
Yeah, there's two warrants. First is that these race-neutral threats to the white body are used to secure ties against blackness, given by the fact that we presented things like the revolution, and people always say, oh, we can't do that because extinction, or these extinction threats are used to get rid of white black people. Things like second is that these forms of white, that's pretty much it. It puts black people's demands on the back burner and negates people. It also causes psychic violence to black people on the basis of we're all going to die.
Okay, let's go back to the K. I guess part first to the F does the K disagree with?
The reps and the policy of the F.
Can you tell me the specific reps discussions?
Wait, what?
Can you tell me the specific reps that the K disagrees with?
I mean, there's a lot. You want me to go through every single one of them?
Yeah.
Okay, sure. The first representation we disagree with is of you viewing the space as transcendental or something that is uniquely good. One good example is something that you think things like military satellites are uniquely good to be in space, and that private space would problematize that, which probably proves that you think that space is good. Second is that you have satellites would be good.
This evidence needs to be very contextualized, things like control of space. We're just talking about things like satellites.
Your affirmative talks about satellite collisions.
Affirmative evidence, the first piece of evidence on the K.
What?
It seems like the representation of space. The stage evidence. Can you tell me lines where it talks about how parts of space, like satellites, etc., are the forms of racial capitalism? Not these seems to just vary about extraterrestrial projections.
Yeah, that's exactly what you're trying to preserve: military satellites in space.
Okay, so this doesn't talk about satellites, to be clear.
I don't care if it doesn't talk about satellites. It's talking about.
What does the alternative do to solve these other
forms? Liberal, things like that.
What does the alternative do to solve forms of militarization space? Is it just not engage in space? Is it no space militarization under the alt?
Sure. I mean, we think the state is bad. We think we should overthrow hegemonic institutions.
Sure. Can you explain the warrant behind the Idrisi evidence?
Idrisi evidence? Yeah, sure. Our argument is that the state sets the framework for private appropriation to happen. Things like, regulations, rules, laws, etc. But it allows for those property rights to exist, laws, things like that.
So does the alternative get rid of those laws?
The alternative would problematize the state's jurisdiction over property rights.
Okay. 5 minutes, right? I'll run for up. I posited 3 F5 used. Let me send the doc. Not give an order. Oh, okay. Wait. Oh yeah, 155. My bad. Wait, it's sent.
Is it an email?
Yeah. I can do Flasher if Lucas, if you want it like that.
Email's fine. Hold on 1 sec.
Okay.
I have not gotten it yet, but
Yeah, it'll take some time.
Yeah, I haven't gotten the email yet. Alright, I'm opening it.
me too. I'm good with it.
Okay.
I need the order, but yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna do it right now. Order is gonna be T, the F will be Advantage Framework, the counterplan, and then the K. Is everyone good?
Yeah, I'm good.
Oh, Lucas did it, yeah.
I'm good.
Okay. Awesome. Cool. Yeah. Interpretation, the evidence from appropriations to get the distribution which means the means often your total will require limited distributed distribution of the line of the occurs and breaking the part of the generation is low in split the immersion managed for us in the case of officially predictable interfaces of the image is more important standard days class also go in doesn't particular parts of the show were lost more minutes to different different BF and advanced class philosophy different mechanisms and processes are currently were safe versus when we said reading the 118 reading 37 times you'd be negative generation the eagerness of space activation because after anything respect is also a complete argument was 5 seconds in the 118 and all causes with solving depending on private entity depending on government etc. Okay. Extend space for the events are rendered from estimating the difference political disputes and space axis and escalating engines and perception gaps cause space where that goes nuclear leads to extinction independently. There's only 2 responses here. First, on the no space war arguments, A point is conceded that perception is a unique deficit insofar as this person trying to believe that it's enough to go to conflict. B point is that there are evidence assumes that countries say it's act rational, but it wouldn't because Russia trying to believe that the US is getting a strategic advantage in mining. They say Russia and China would say no, but Fiat is good innovation, which encourages them to say yes because they're part of the planet. Otherwise, the affirmers would always use a negative question or solvency mechanism. There's no reason why the planet is objectively good on framework. Overview and framework said there are evidence assumes that we were sort of passive upon them materializing into the extinction, but ours is just political theorizing. A point is that it assumes that those things are real, but they aren't because we aren't identifying things like things in research extraction, etc. Just preventing aspects from just preventing a condition of conflict. B point is turn things like real life world outweigh their impacts because it means it's a question of them living or not. They've considered the hypothetical policy making is good from the Burke evidence. This means that any risk that we can win that extinction them even more outweighs this. C point is no link. The affirmative doesn't theorize individuals conflict, but rather a question of countries going to battle. But come on. Firm to the counterplan. The counterplan is functionally plan positive. Their argument is that we should reject space policy. They want to see rejects for narrations of space policy. They also refer to private appropriation, which the counterplan adds to listing other regions should also be rejected. And space policy is good. They've conceded Malcolm Rifle 19 global space governance is good. Even though the space policy is safe for weaponization, only global governance can check militarization and use the weapons themselves and have benefits. Fifth is they have zero enforcement alternative besides for policy, so they can solve the case. Six is the counterplan failed to release the space to base will if it's an inevitable consequence of military tech development, but public tech started here, which means they were past weaponization point on the case. Conduct a voting issue first, slash incentivizes the negative always being from the center position returns then engagement. Second, just solves they can confirm gives them no flexibility of solving or offense. When competing interpretations disrupt the reader crossfire from the underview and private agree is the voting issues boost 1 year searching close up grammar lines and next rolling including feature over linkers and solves yes to the link to the case principle education boost their models just actually rising on the K proper. First is framework interpretation. The basis of the consequences of the plan. Fairness, search referring to the one you see the different parts of the one you see the problem. First thing on 1 year we said our sources also cites the consequences of the plan to make these tests assumption implementation. Second is gateways. Part of the sexual impact of progress any possibility of political change material improvements in your personal value independently. Affirmative extinction effects outweigh A point its magnitude. Another evidence indicates that extinction just as capitalism will cause a bad form of conflict. Our evidence indicates that extinction happens and if conceded birth, which means extinction comes first. B point is probability. None of the evidence indicates that the communism should be enough insofar that it would take a long time for them to happen, which also means that we outweigh on time from on the K property. on the free property. The alternative can also solve case communism wouldn't stop actors from intervening, and the alternative wouldn't stop actors from intervening, which is the Russia China scenario, and permutation devoted and she evidence is contextualized how we should have less innovation with less interaction with the affirmative would do on the first link. A point is turn, the affirmative is an imperial control, which is what your evidence is about. B point is no link. Their evidence is on mining. Their evidence is things like satellites in general, but that is contextual to geopolitical dominance. It does not mean that they're key. I.e., I could say things like nukes are bad, but we should prevent people from attacking them. This means the affirmative defense thinks that satellites and geopolitical power key. On the second link evidence, turn the affirmative would restrict government involvement in space because they wouldn't have incentive to protect their assets inside of space. That was the funnel evidence. So that's why they have incentive to protect things like astro mining, etc. And on the accumulation battery, when turn the affirmative would prevent appropriation, which is a form of capitalist accumulation because private entities they can take anything they want and turn there are alternative ISIS people who don't believe the capitalist struggle, people who don't believe that the state is not good, etc. will all be ISIS are the alternative because they're understanding something that is capitalist is not a problem that is bad and their links are not reverse causal. The alternative wouldn't solve. There's no reason why the alternative would solve things like imperial programs insofar as that it only affects the people and the control for solvency should be the marginal outcomes of action. Justice should be wrong. This 19 is important to just any was the found justice wrong mind and leaders of the most like jeopardize the labels and weakness identify the problem the nobles and the social parties and reasons of all social reality the limitations of every noble business of pragmatic control relation about losing our issues some reasons and others were problems that are using us to make an efficient connection and never are in fact really was the way out of forward. The correct way out and forward didn't read the Klotz evidence.
Alright, cool. 5 minutes starting now. What was the? Let's see here. Sorry, what were the condo standards? I got only this but follows.
First is clash. Second is this as follows.
That was it?
Yeah.
What was the clash standard?
Encourages the negative to always go for the most undercovered position, which harms the stance of engagement.
Okay. And the private actor stuff?
Private defeat is bad because it skews one-year strategy, and kills off ground by allowing the negative to rely on utopian fiat to avoid leading turns and solvency deficits. And then it was like turns critical education because it proves their model is just abstract theorizing.
Okay. Okay, sorry, lastly, what was the response to the weighing evidence? Like, sorry, you kind of got cut out or something.
Sorry, where was that?
The one after, like, the second link evidence, where we restrict government regulation.
Oh yeah, the accumulation link. It was turn the affirmative. Turn the affirmative reduces appropriation, which is a form of capitalist accumulation. When I see evidence indicates that private entities have an incentive to sort of do mining in space, which is the sort of capitalist accumulation they talk about.
Alright, cool. The order will be the counter plan, the critique, then case. Let me know when y'all are good.
I'm good if there's no doc.
Yeah, there's no doc. Derek, is everyone good?
I'm good.
DD, are you good?
Yep.
Cool. Sorry, I'm opening this up. Alright, cool. Oh, sorry.
The pick out concede permutation, do what is a test of composition, not offense, takes out all offense, every single immediate they can get options on the face of the camera isn't competitive, go to the critique.
Where's the condo debate?
Counter to I get one critique and one card plan, 1.2 negative flexibility, next is a key strategy negating resolution and preserves competitive equity, 2 point diversity, allows us to explore more diverse arguments and knock over arguments that are simply bad, key to the best policy option to be tested from both ideologies, and we only justify what we do. Our interpretation of negative team gets only 2 conditional advocacies that interest all the multiple card plan and strategy arguments, dropped by argument, not the debater. Now, the line by key framings for the entirety of the condo debate. If you think the debate was not impossible for them, if 1% said the debate wasn't impossible, then there's a reason to vote negatively. You can't vote for a condo debate because it means the debate was just hard, not impossible, which is obviously hard debate is obviously good debate. Incentivizes better 1 year, is not a clash argument. No, if next flexibility, I always clash first at that first the next flex, I always try to clash where there was no clash because there was only 2 or 3 options positions and barely average on case. Obviously, you can't answer that you don't deserve to advance to the bid round. Second is that next flex, I always all other clash arguments because affirmative is person's last speech and the person's last speech and infinite prime time, but negative only gets 30 minutes of prime time to be effective for you. Obviously, we need different rounds to do that and 2 conditional checks all of our options. This will solve, doesn't matter. One hold does an infinite this way. If they can't, there's no unique options, and also this doesn't solve because all of our options specifically are predicated on up having infinite negative flexibility because we need to be able because this means that it says for restrictions on the negative that the 1 year knows about the 1 year can manipulate and stick me with a card plan, which obviously outweighs necklace. Also, that over, that outweighs the actual K debate proper. Here's the key framing for the entirety of the K debate. The 1 year was a bunch of 1 second, 10 second analytical bliss that were not clear. You should not hold me accountable to any of your arguments, all of your analytical arguments. Insofar as they're super unclear, there's a bunch of blippy arguments that didn't answer the thesis of the link argument. If you want to link arguments, vote negative on any risk of a link because it tears the entire case absent alternative policy over thesis argument. But our thesis is that the app uses to assist by racial capitalism, where whiteness and capitalism were co-constitutively suppressed black people and sustained growth. 2 impacts. First is black dispossession, where black dark rich and carceral labor exploited for financial capital. Second is that racial capitalism causes extinction like warming, war, etc. because it's based upon a faulty logic of infinite growth over binary research that justifies unsafe appropriation of territories, which will turn case on the libel lane. Now, the libel line popper at the top first is going to be the link page, which goes massively undercovered, extended human vitality link. That's a stage 14 and Andrew C17 piece of evidence there. Representation of species as unique moral good, reifies racial dispossession, and a codified appropriation of racial capitalism as white liberalism is equal to distance itself from anti-black practices through this race neutral white liberalism. This reinforcement of the public and state's role in space is a sacrificial logic that ghettoizes and exploits carceral labor to sustain a financial capital necessary for space, just like how JFK's movies justify U.S. imperialism on the basis of space being liberatory and key to humanity, which only further mass the state's role in anti-blackness. The impact is a restatement of the state's role in the appropriation and the entirety of the athletes. 2 different places. First is that their policy is bad because they literally defend the OC as a mechanism for the plan and mention international boundaries as unnecessary numerous times in the 1EC, which is obviously a way to expand to jurisdiction regulation and links back into Entry 17. Their reps also links to the usage as something liberatory and key to humanity. Either military satellite scenario proves positive representation of space, but those liberatory reps also justify ghettoization and violence of black people on the ground. They can't kick out their representations because it was in the 1EC that turns case Entry proves case public is just as unsustainable, meaning every link argument about the unsustainable mighty happening under YAP also means that happens under YAP also means that AFCA circumvented versus industrial policy fair because the public is a precondition to the private, i.e. the public forms a renting relationship with the private, so that even after the firm, the public will allow some, they can reduce private appropriation, but private appropriation will continue having past the public, past the OSC, because just because you get rid of the tenants doesn't mean you get rid of landowners, doesn't mean you get rid of other private companies, like the fact that SpaceX gets grants from NASA. Now the libel line on the link debate. First, the permutation debate is incredibly incoherent. The links are disasked to the affirmative representations, meaning any permutation was severed out of the affirmative severed out of the representation. That's a voting issue justifies conditionality or disregarding voter representation independently. The links are disasked to the permutation because the permutation would probably just do the affirmative if it doesn't sever. That outweighs because if we're going to win a framing debate and a role to balance an impact filter for the permutation. You say you're not imperialism or control. You just asserted that and you should. We've obviously won that you're imperialism and control because we won reasons as to why your specific form of public space is bad. You say our argument is not about stats. No, our argument specifically about stats is talking about how the way way in which extraterrestrial control is bad. Obviously, military satellites are the epitome of extraterrestrial control. We can make that bridge to Andrew 17 piece of evidence. Andrew G, and that doesn't make any sense. It just says that we restrict government regulations, but you obviously don't, because the OSD is the epitome of international bodies, and your own pieces of evidence in the first opinion says that international regulation and international bodies are good. The Wayne 18 piece of evidence that says that you reduce that says that you reduce things like you say you don't reduce appropriation, because one reason why your appropriation is specifically encapsulating always all their arguments. Now the framing debate is going to be incredibly clear. They have done no way to roll about this endorse taxes against racial capitalism. That means any risk of alternative policies to show a negative and takes out the affirmative counter to value as an object of scholarship, object of study. This means that they don't get to weigh their causal consequences, but do get their epistemology reps. Neutral is not relevant because it's a question of whether they get to weigh the efforts. It's uniquely key to debate, because debating education is society where race neutrality informs everything. Discussion about black people never happen because white people think they've done enough, from a post-racial society only are allows for these discussions to happen in the first place. You can talk about extinction every other round, and education hours for Giro proves that the education we have in debate cultivates either ethical or unethical subjectivities. We should prioritize anti-racist activities and always on management insofar as they haven't done any fairness hours education. Weighing in the one area you should not grant the two-year fairness argument. No, it doesn't moot any of the fairness. Obviously, you still get your epistemological representation like extinction framing good. You said there's no need to separate, but obviously there are reasons to separate, because if we want that the representation of the top line obviously doesn't come to be right because they're framework. Look, if we want to frame debate, the unfair link terms apply to critique, because all our link terms based upon the causal consequence of the but we want representation links, which is a reasonable negative. Now, lastly, is the alternative debate. The alternative from revolutionary intercommunalism, extend UNO40, all organized the lumber proletariat form concrete moves against the capitalist machine, improve material conditions. This is an international movement against racial cap, where we seize power institutions and the means of progressive voting, negatively endorse these tactics specifically in the debate. We reject the as intel relationship to space. Now, the limelight, the private actor fiat argument. No, this is Mr. Peter draw the argument at worse. It would be draw the argument worse because it said the alternative is abusive, but this argument doesn't make any sense. Counter to private actor fiat is because it's negative critical ground, because every single alternative wouldn't endorse state action. That always all the arguments of critical ground in education doesn't skew the affirmative, because it's sweeping. You get a bunch of this like cap good and doesn't kill hypothesis, because it's if it's utopia, because he opposite the case always argument doesn't matter because you don't get to weigh. You say alternative can't solve cases, doesn't have to. You say abstract theorizing is bad, but we haven't done abstract theories or linguist theories and strictly theories. It's why the way in which the affirmative theory of politics is bad. You say we take black people out. We obviously don't, because even if they don't abide to the class struggle, they don't have to abide to the class struggle, because we'll just overdose hegemonic institutions. All cancel paragraphs. It doesn't have to, because we endorse practice in the that we operationalize outside of the base states. Any risk of autonomy outweighs because cap causes extinction.
Okay, I'll run prep now. Order will just be K. Is everyone good? Aditya and Troy.
I'm good.
Okay, awesome. Cool. Let me use some. Sorry, let's get some water. Okay. extend the permutation. If we win, our representations are better than theirs, and if we win, that we are in connection to injustice and racial capitalism, then you can vote affirmative on the perm because they would call their offense while still avoiding a risk of link debate. This takes out the framework. It means we don't have to win our offense and response to severance because severance assumes that we are separating out of representations. But if we win, that our representations are independently good for the activity, then that's the reason you can vote and why they're better. Extend the link defense. Reviews of the affirmative, they were the against the wrong affirmative. Our affirmative doesn't identify things like geopolitical justice is important. It doesn't identify things like space colonization is important, etc. But the affirmative identifies that mining is bad because mining is more of a private accumulation that causes conflict. There's two scenarios we're going for. First is a turn on accumulation. The two hours exceedingly bare on the wing. If it's identifying why the affirmative isn't capitalism, but our evidence is great. It identifies what the affirmative is a response to capitalism because private entities believe that they have the ability to exploit capitalism and continue to invest in things like mining. But the affirmative would stop that because it would reduce their involvement. This is independently important under the rules of the permutation because the world of the permutation. The second reason you're voting on the perm is the world. They've conceded the permutation explanation. The perm isn't just a question of doing good, it's a question of embracing things like communist struggle by a delimitation of space actors. This means that your understanding of a communist struggle should be based on how we can reduce our involvement in space. The affirmative is an example of that. That was the response that was conceded. The final evidence indicates from the one you see that governments are investing in space because they have to guard their resources, they have to guard their mining. The affirmative would reduce that. That means that the world of the permutation is a world where we get rid of mining, which reduces government involvement, which is exactly what the alternative would do, which is a net favorable reason to prefer the permutation. The third reason you're voting on the permutation is that there's no link to the stage evidence. You need to identify things like satellites is important for geopolitical investment. The affirmative isn't satellites. If you consider the analogical contextualization, which will extend here, I could say things like nuclear weapons are bad. I could say they're a suck for the world. They're a bad form of criminal colonization, but we should still prevent people from stealing them because that independently is a harmful conduct. The affirmative doesn't identify satellites important. We don't give a fuck if they're good or not, but it's a question of whether or not satellites should be allowed to be attacked by Russia and China, whether they should be allowed to destroy conflict, etc. All of these conflicts and the things that only the affirmative can prevent. We'll do the link defense here. The tuner is very unclear on why we don't get link events. The tuner is very unclear on why we don't get stage events. If you catch a warrant from the tuner that uses it, and it's very uncovered, and it doesn't account for our evidence. It doesn't account for our understanding of how we understand satellite comparison. They say that the stage evidence is an understanding of sustainable conflict, but that's not what your stage evidence is about. You should read this evidence. It's about things like geopolitical control by the United States, etc. All of these things are something that the affirmative would prevent because the affirmative interactive knowledge. Insofar as that we have a risk of the permutation, you can err affirmative on the risk that extinction outweighs the rules of the permutation, solves all of your impacts, but you don't get that turn case. 3 reasons why. A point is that there's no explanation of why conflict would be unsustainable. You turn a communist struggle, but you consider that you do not solve case because you do not think like independent conflict scenarios between Russia and China escalating, etc. Those are not tied to a communist struggle. They aren't tied towards understanding racial capitalism. They're tied to an understanding of whether or not Russia and China will go to war over astronomy, which is only something the rules of the permutation can do. B point is that you don't get access to our impacts. You don't allow the two and to get a new explanation of the case. That wasn't what you had from the 1 and 2. Their understanding of things like a communist struggle isn't contextualized to things like astronomy and can explain the independent intrinsities here. Look, you can put in the permutation because they're only response to yours. So it links to the net benefit. The links are just the permutation. If we win the links, or even a risk of a link is not true, because the affirmative is a form of like geopolitical restriction, then you can err out from the risk of extinction outweighs. Good debate.
Good debate.